Hi everyone, my name is Lee. I'm a senior software engineer at Vizro, an open source Python package built on top of Plotly and Dash. It's designed to make building beautiful Dash apps as quick and easy as possible. And today I'll show you how to create a beautiful dashboard in less than 120 lines of code. We'll follow the official user tutorial, so feel free to code along with me. So this is the dashboard that we end up with by the end of the video. It has a logo, a title, and a theme switch to toggle between a light and a dark theme. We will have multiple pages and a navigation on the left side to toggle between these. We also add controls to the left side and components to the right side, such as graphs, tables, and KPI cards. We'll use the layout to either use the grid or the flex layout. And we also learn how to use inbuilt Vizro actions such as exporting data. Alright, let's dive in. First things first, let's install Vizro. So you can install Vizro via the pip install Vizro command as any other Python package. But alternatively, you can also use PyCafe, which is a platform where you can live edit Python applications. It's free, it's easy to use, and there's no setup required. So for this purpose of the tutorial, I will use PyCafe, but you are free to use anything you prefer. We just have to click on the Vizro template that's already available. And as you can see on the left-hand side, you can see the code. And on the right-hand side, you will see the application. So I will just delete all of the code here. And then this is all that we need for the tutorial. So as I've already mentioned, we will follow along the official user tutorial from Vizro. So I will add this URL link to the video description below, and you will find all of the relevant code snippets in here. Let's just get started. So let's create our first page. The first thing that we want to do is just to display the data in a table. So for this, I will just copy paste this code and add it into our PyCafe browser. Don't forget to click either Save All in here or just Command S. And as you can see, this now shows our changes on the right side. Let me just go through the syntax so it's easier to understand. I hope you guys can see it very well, but I just zoomed in. So at the beginning, we have the imports as in any other web application, and we load in the data. In this case, we use the Plotly Express tips dataset. So to create our first page inside the dashboard, we define the first page as a variable and assign it the VM page model. The VM page model in the end is a Pydantic model with validations, but you can read about that in our documentation as well. But each page needs to have a title. In this case, we just call it data that you can see here. And we have components. In this case, it's just a VM AgGrid with the data of the tips dataset. In the end, we also want to display a footer with the data source information. To call the dashboard, we have to, of course, assign the VM dashboard to the dashboard variable and provide our first page in there. And in the end, we just call the Vizro build dashboard 1 call. So this gives us the application on the right side. Let me just switch to full screen mode so you can see it better. As you can see, in less than 30 lines of code, we have a table that is interactive. You can resize it, you can filter and sort as you like. And automatically, a theme switch is added to the right side without us actually actively configuring it. So this is something that comes nicely out of the box from Vizro. So this lets us switch between the dark and light theme. As a next step, I would like to add a button in here that lets us download the dataset. So to enable that, we're going to go back to the documentation. We're going to go to the Add and Export Data button section and copy-paste the relevant code snippet here. Let's go back to editor mode and add the button below the table because that's where we want to place it. Click on Command Save or the Save All button. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the button is immediately visible. Let's take a look at the syntax. So we have added the button from Vizro models again. So again, it's a Pydantic model with validation. We have provided it a text called export data, which is then displayed in the button. And what's special about it is we attached an action. In this case, we attached the export data action coming from Vizro Actions, which basically ensures that if someone now clicks on the export data button, it would download the dataset. So that's, I think, very nice because essentially we didn't have to encode that logic, but we could just use an inbuilt action from Vizro. You might notice that the spacing is a bit suboptimal because we have a lot of spacing below the button. This is because the default from Vizro is a CSS grid. So equal spacing will be assigned between the components defined. And in our case, it's the table and the button. But to improve that, we could switch to a flex layout. Click on save. This already looks a lot better, but I think the table could have even more height. So let's take a look. This -AgGrid function is just a thin wrapper around the -AgGrid. So you can specify any arguments in here that you would also specify for the AgGrid, for example. So click on save. Let's say the table should have a height of 500 pixels. I think that's the one that looks nice. Yes, and as you can see, this looks a lot nicer in terms of spacing as well. So congrats, we just finished our first page where we can get an overview of the data and also download it. As a next step, we want to have multiple pages in our dashboard. So we go back to our documentation, go to the next section, create a second page. In this case, we want to add a couple more charts since we already have a table. For that, the visual vocabulary is actually a good resource because it's actually also a dashboard built with Vizro itself. It's inspired by the Financial Times visual vocabulary, so it has the same categories. And what it contains is a lot of charts giving you an idea or an inspiration. And if you go into these charts, first of all, it gives you information of what this chart is about, when it should be used, and then also the code required to plug it into a Vizro dashboard, or even just the pure Plotly code. So this is something that I've been using for this dashboard as well. But in our case, we can just go to the second page and copy paste this code into our PyCafe editor. Don't forget to add the page then to the dashboard. We define a VM page, we provide a title, and we define components. In this case, we have been using the VM graph model, and the VM graph model can take on any kind of Plotly chart. We're gonna click on save. And if we now go to our editor, you can see that the page has been automatically added and an accordion with navigation has also been automatically added. So this is something that we don't have to actively encode. It just happens because we now have two pages. And we now have a page with these two graphs. I want to add a couple of more components. So in the next section, we're gonna add some KPI cards. I'm gonna copy paste this code again, add it into our editor. Click on save. And here we go. Now we have our KPI cards and our histograms, but I think the histograms look a bit cramped. So what we want to do is to actually just place them inside some tabs where we can then just switch between these views because we don't need the same chart twice if we actually just want to change the variable. So we're gonna go to the next section, add tabs to switch views. This is the syntax to create these tabs. So instead of adding the chart code in here now, I'm just going to add the tabs. This chart is actually just being taken on and then placed in here. And this chart is also just being taken and being placed in here. Clicking on save. And as you can see, this looks a lot better because now we have the histograms, but we can switch between these views. We can also optimize the layout. So for this, I'm gonna go back to the documentation and we're gonna finally use the grid layout. So the grid layout is something that's normally a bit difficult to understand, but essentially it works exactly like the CSS grid. So we're gonna take this grid, and I already prepared a Miro board. So we have the same grid here. I just want to quickly explain what's gonna happen or what this grid actually does. in our configuration, we have defined 3 components actually. So I can delete this one. One was a KPI card, the other one was another KPI card, and the third one was our tabs. So what this grid does is, in the order that it appears in the components argument, it places these components inside the grid. So this grid has 4 columns and 4 rows. That's what we see here, 4 columns and 4 rows. And now what the grid does, it places the first component that we've defined and places it in the first square, as you can see here. So that's the 0. The second component is then placed in here. Let me just make the title a bit smaller. Here we go. Then -1 basically just means empty space, so no components will be placed here. And then the last component, which is basically the third component in our order, but with index 2, is then placed in the 3 rows and then 4 columns. So this is what the grid essentially does. And if we now just copy paste that, here we go, into our PyCafe configuration, you will see exactly that grid. Clicking on save. And as you can see, we now have exactly the same layout as in our tutorial here. And the assignment is basically similar to a CSS grid. I hope this visual explains it a bit better, but let me know if this is still unclear. The next thing we want to do is just adding a filter. So I'm gonna go to the relevant code snippet here, copy paste it again. Add it into our PyCafe editor again. Just below here is fine. Click save. I'm going to explain the syntax first, and then I can show you how this now looks like. But as you can see, the filters have been now added below the navigation panel. But what it does is it just creates a filter with the day column. And the day column is coming from the tips data set. The default for all categorical data is a dropdown, so that's why a dropdown was selected here. If we want to switch the default, we can just define a selector. In the second case, for example, for the time one, we wanted to have a checklist. And the size column is a numerical column. That's why a slider was automatically selected. So if I go now to the dashboard, you can see that we can now filter and everything works very nicely. And the only thing we had to do for that was to add the filter to the page. So that's it. We created our second page with controls, components, and the CSS grid. I think by now you should be slowly familiar with the Vizro syntax because it's actually always the same. So for the last and final page, we're gonna go back to creating a third page. And this time I'm just gonna copy paste everything in here because the syntax is exactly similar. Let me just add it to our editor as well. So this we have now duplicated. Click on save. I'm gonna show you the third page in a second. Let me just click on that one actually. But you can see it's already rendering. But just to taking a look at the syntax, we define a page again, provide a title. I now use different kind of Plotly Express charts, which I've also taken from the visual vocabulary again, and I provide a title to each graph. So if we now take a look at the results, the syntax is very similar, and of course we had to also assign the third page to the dashboard model, but the results are very nice because we can now see the different charts stacked underneath each other. But again, we want to optimize the layout. So we're gonna use the grid layout again. In this case, I think now you should hopefully know the syntax, but we want to have this grid layout, which means that the first chart will be placed on the left corner, the second chart on this right corner, and the third chart will be then just taking all of the bottom space. So if we now just copy paste that, Going back to the editor. Here we go. So now we have the layout, which looks already a lot better. And we have our navigations and our different pages. So let's go to the next steps in our tutorial, adding a parameter. So a parameter, the concept of it might be a bit unfamiliar, but in the end, it's actually very simple. So a parameter is a type of control that lets you target specific arguments of other components. For example, let's say we want to have these 3 visualizations for different variables. For example, in this case, the X variable is day in all of these charts, but maybe I want to have different cuts of the same data set. So maybe I want to see this per time, maybe I want to see this per size, maybe I want to see it via other arguments. And instead of duplicating these 3 visuals, like, I don't know, 10 times to see it with different cuts, we can add a parameter in there. So the syntax, I will copy paste from the last section. Going back to the editor. Adding it as a control in here. This is expected because I haven't assigned the variables yet. So what we want to target is we have to provide IDs to the relevant charts because otherwise the parameter doesn't know what we need to target. So I think, oh wait, no, below is the violent chart. Then we have the bar above. And here we have the heat map. Clicking on save. So the syntax is very similar as well. So we have a parameter, and as a selector, we now choose radio items. The dimensions I want to choose from, previously it was fixed on day, but I also want to take a look how the visuals look for time, sex, smoker, and size. But the default will be day. And I have a title for the parameter as well. And what we want to target in each of these is the X axis, such that these basically change. And for the violent chart, I also want to change the color. So if I now click on how this works, so I have my parameter in here, and take a look at the X-axis right now. Right now it's day for all of the charts, but if I now click on time, it's now time everywhere. Then we can also switch between the others. I think an advantage of the parameter is that you don't have to duplicate these charts just to see different slices of the data. Instead, you can use a parameter to basically keep your dashboard decluttered and as simple as possible. So that's basically the use case for when you want to use a parameter. And in the last section now, we want to add a custom chart. Let me see. Yes, so you might see it already here, but you see like these little lines in these graphs or in this bar chart. This normally happens if you don't pre-aggregate the data before in your Plotly Express charts. So that's why we need to pre-aggregate the data set for this chart before. And this is a good use case for a custom chart function. So I will go to the next section. I will copy this and will explain you the syntax in a second. So I'm gonna add this in here. I've already added the imports at the beginning, so I don't have to do it again. And the use case when you need to use this custom chart decorator is either when you need to pre-aggregate the data before, or if you have any post-update layout calls for the Plotly Express chart. So now we just use this custom chart instead of the PX bar one. So I think we can just replace this. And as you can see, now we got rid of these extra lines and it got pre-aggregated, and we also reduced the width of the bar. So that's it. We just finished our third page as well. So Now we come to my favorite part in dashboard building, which are the final touches to make everything even better. In this case, we want to add a title and a dashboard logo. The title is very easy because we just have to specify a title inside the dashboard model. Tips, data, analysis, dashboard. But you can call it anything you want. Here we go. The title is now added. And to add a logo in there, it's actually very easy because we just need to have a file called logo. So I'm just going to download this. I already downloaded it before. And then what we need to do is inside our PyCafe editor. Now I have to expand this window. I have to create a folder called assets. So I'm going to do this now, assets folder. And inside that assets folder, I just need to place that logo file. So it can be actually any PNG, SVG, or whatever extension. As long as it's called logo, it will be automatically be picked up by the Vizro dashboard as long as it's in this assets folder next to the app.py file. So now we have our logo and our dashboard title. But essentially, I also want to optimize the navigation. So the accordion is actually quite nice, but I want to just switch it out with a navbar. So for this, I'm going to copy paste actually the code for that. Here we go. Here we go. Going back to the PyCafe editor. Here we go. So inside the dashboard model, let me just add a bit spacing here so it's easier to read. Oops. So inside the dashboard model, we're going to define a navigation. Here we go. That's better. And this navigation is a VM navigation model again. We can select between different things, but in this case, I want a navbar. And this navbar exists of two nav links. One is called data and one is called charts. And these are the pages I want to have in this nav icon. So we created 3 pages called summary, analysis, and data. 2 of these I want to have in the charts nav icon, and data I want to have in the other icon. These icons are just references to the Google Material Icon library. So I'm going to click on Save. And now you can see that this has now been replaced with a navbar. Here we have the data page inside, and here we have the summary and analysis. And these are the icons from the Google Material Icon library. So that's it. We have finalized the dashboard. We have these 2 very beautiful navigation items, the different pages, controls, components, and everything comes for free in the dark and light theme. If you go to the project, if you already have a PyCafe profile, you can actually just push your project, which then means that this will be saved and also now published to your profile. Other than that, don't forget to save, otherwise the changes will be lost. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. I will add all of the relevant links in the video description below. And if you would like to see more videos like this, then let me know in the comments. Until then, happy dashboarding. Bye!